Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're here, and we broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli, and with us today, hour number one, Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith from Australia, welcome. Welcome to USA Prepares. You know, Guineith, I can't hear you.
It's about 1 a.m. in the morning here because we have been inflicted with daylight savings. I don't know if the people in your country are familiar with that particular form of torture.
Yeah, we
it
are.
Messes us, it messes us up twice a year.
Yeah. It happens here as well. Not every state, but just about all the states here are inflicted with daylight savings time. Just when we get used to the clock, we change it.
Yep. And the only reason I can think of is it messes with your body clock twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it just throws you off. And yes, it's handy to have that extra hour in the evening to do stuff, especially on a farm. But the thing is, you know, you get such a high rate of notice of sickness. You get low energy levels in that week. It's just like a bout of jet lag.
Yeah,
really
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And
it's
we can choose
as well.
We can choose not to fly, but it's really hard to choose to get away from daylight savings time unless we decide that we are going to stop the change in the clock and storm City Hall, if you would, and make that change.
Yeah, but you see, in states where you have a high urban population, like Victoria in Australia, you've got about 3 million people in Melbourne, which is and Geelong, which is the main big metropolitan area, and then you've got 2 million people in the remainder of the state. So it suits city people just fine because they get off at effectively, in ordinary time, they get off at like 4 p.m. from their work, and they can go and sit by the river and have picnics and all that. But for farming folk, it's just a damn nuisance.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering. I was talking with John, our engineer, just before the broadcast started, about we're talking about Chicago steakhouses, and where do they get the beef from? Because they don't raise it in Chicago. We raise beef on farms. So the question is, these picnics that these city dwellers are enjoying, where do they get the ingredients for these picnics? I guess they would come from farms, right?
Well, yeah, they do. Mm-hmm. Either that or they get, in Australia now, most of the pork production, well, not all of it, because I do have a friend who is a pig farmer, and he turns out an enormous quantity of pork. He has a factory farm. But a lot of our pork is actually imported from China, and
wow.
They have, do not eat manufactured pork products unless you know the country of origin, because I have personally seen photos on the internet of tables piled high with human thighs in meat markets in China being passed off as pork.
Wait. Say this one more time. What was being passed off?
Human thighs. Because the Chinese people, have been for a long time, there's been an organization or a religious practice, spiritual practice called Falun Gong. And for many years, the Chinese government has been arresting Falun Gong practitioners and locking them up and organ harvesting them. Okay? And of course, they don't waste the rest of the carcass. They cut it up and eat it, and they sell it in the meat market. This is there are photos on the internet of this, of human body parts being sold as meat in China.
One of our instructors is an Indian, Native American, and he was on this broadcast with us, and he was talking about long pork, LONG PORK, and he said that when Christopher Columbus came to this country, he was expected to bring back, foodstuffs, and they couldn't seem to find what they were looking for, so they killed some Indians, American Indians, and pickled them and smoked them and put them in barrels and brought it back as pork called long pork. Have you heard of that?
Well, I grew up in New Zealand in Rotorua, and up in the people there before the white missionaries came, they were cannibals. They after they became Christians, of course, the cannibalism stopped. The last recorded case of cannibalism around Rotorua was around about 1890, and it was a very old man, and he lived at a place called Tarawera, which is about 16, 20 kilometres or so from Rotorua, and he ate his granddaughter. And he was a bit crazy, and he was a pariah after that in the whole community. But the Maori people, what I was told when I was a little girl was that human flesh did indeed taste a lot like pork. And that's the reason why Maori people today, they generally have they love their pork. And the Hawaiians, because the New Zealand Maoris are actually descended from the Hawaiians. And if you go to Hawaii, the Hawaiian feast, their pork dishes are absolutely lovely. But in the old days, it wasn't pork. Well, it was sometimes pork, but they were cannibals too. All of the Maori nations across all the South Pacific, they were all cannibals at one time or another. But it was often considered to be an act of war, and it was often an act of survival and desperation. So it's really, really quite awful to think that people could descend to that, but sadly they often have, and I will not eat pork products here in Australia anymore, because there is no country of origin labelling on any foodstuffs actually here. They will write made in Australia from local and imported ingredients, or simply made in Australia, and that can mean that under their food packaging codes, made in Australia means maybe all the ingredients don't come from here, but the majority of the processing happens here.
Guineith, many years ago when I lived in Virginia, I went to Sam's Club regularly, and we would buy in bulk. And they had a brand of honey, and I've mentioned this story maybe once or twice in the years that I've been on the air, but they had this brand of honey called Virginia brand. And I thought, wow, okay, this is local honey here at Sam's Club. And so I bought a couple quarts of this honey and brought it home, and our family liked to have tea, hot tea. And most of our coffee mugs or mugs for warm beverages or hot beverages were either tan or white or clear glass. And when I had the hot tea, and then in the mug or the cup, and then I added a teaspoonful of honey, the tea that would be kind of a tan in color or a tannish green if it were green tea or herbal tea turned black. Absolutely dark black.
Wow.
Like the color of black coffee. And this
That's
story.
disgusting.
Okay, well let me tell you why it's disgusting. So I contacted Virginia Brands, and I talked to senior management about it, and they thought I was kidding. And then they decided they would test it themselves, and they found that I was correct. And then they decided that they would pull off the shelves the honey that they had sold under the Virginia brand label, and they admitted to me what happened. They said that they bought tanks of honey from China, and they traced the problem down within a couple days to the way the honey was transported from the hives to the processing to put it in containers. And what happened was they used buckets. They used galvanized buckets to transport the honey. And the zinc or whatever the chemicals that are used in the galvanizing process for these buckets contaminated the honey and caused this problem. So
it was actually an oxide of whatever heavy metal they'd used to treat the zinc, to treat the iron that was in the buckets, the steel.
I can't say for sure, but what I can say, what I can say is they pulled the honey off the shelves, and here's the point. The point is Virginia brand or Chicago Tools or Pittsburgh Tools. Well, the Pittsburgh brand is from Harbor Freight, and it comes from China. Chicago Tools. Wow. China.
Yep.
There you go. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and she's in Australia right now. I'm in Missouri. Guineith, we're talking about some deception, and I don't know if you'd call this deception or illusion or what the correct word would be, but I mentioned Harbor Freight Tools. And Harbor Freight Tools currently has about 700 stores in the United States, and they are primarily a company that imports tools from China. I call it the Chinese factory tool outlet. And here are some of the names of the products, their lines of tools, and their in-house store brands, okay? U.S. General, that's one of them. Earthquake is another one. That's for their impact wrenches. Then they have Central Pneumatic, which is a takeoff of Chicago Pneumatic. Chicago Pneumatic is an old U.S. company. Then they have Pittsburgh Pro. That's another Chinese tool, but it's called Pittsburgh. And then they have Chicago Electric. That's another Chinese tool. And then they have, for their outdoor electric equipment, it's Portland. So yes. Very clever. Very, very clever. But that's... So I guess the point is that just because there is a U.S. sounding name or a U.S. sounding location, like in Virginia honey, it may not be. It may not be. So beware.
You've
beware.
got to check the origin of everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's another story that I want to share with you very, very quickly. There's a guy, one of our instructors, his name is Mark Baker. Mark Baker was attacked by the Department of Natural Resources, DNR, in the state of Michigan. And he was raising hogs. And they said, well, I can't do that because those hogs that you've got, Mark Baker, are feral. And we can't have that. And so Mark wanted to know, how do you tell? And
Yep, you can't.
he was told straight tails, curly tails. And okay, what other kind of tails are there? I don't know. I think that's pretty much the gamut of tails. And so it was just one of these government minions coming down. Then there were more of them. And then he ended up in court. And he won his case. He said, no, I'm not going to kill all my animals just because you guys say I have to. So he fought them and he won. And I met Mark Baker. A bunch of us from USA Prepares drove out to meet him, and it was great. Well, he's been on the air a couple times with us, and so here's natural news. Here's a news story. A Michigan man once faced off against government agents over his refusal to kill feral pigs on his organic farm is now running for sheriff in a bid to end the agricultural tyranny, at least in his county. Mark Baker, co-founder and owner of Baker's Green Acres, located in Marion, Michigan, told Natural News in an interview that the primary reason he's running is to restore constitutional order, beginning with Missaukee County, in which he resides. So he's sending a message.
Yep.
And it'd be wonderful if he won, because I think a lot of people in the government will be very concerned about his position as sheriff. So he wants to put protect and to serve on the police cars, and I believe he's going to restore the sheriff's office to the way it used to be. And he says his job as sheriff is to protect the people, not to be their jailer.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, you know something? From what I can see, in my whole life, I have only known one area where the police have been other than an extortion racket and gang.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was around the area of Eildon and Yea in Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Everywhere else that I have ever been in my whole life, the police have been variously extortionists, drug smugglers, child kidnappers, and thugs. And I have, you know, I had my best friend. Yesterday I was talking to her on the phone, and I was explaining something which I'll explain in a moment. And she said, I just can't understand why you can't seem to get along with anyone. I said, Siri, it's not me.
Because
it's not me.
She's genetically defective. That's why.
I think that must be the way it is with a lot of preppers. That we're just not willing to bow the knee to people who want to push us around.
We don't take direction very well. We'll be right back. Class Guineith Isaacs is with us, and I'm kind of chuckling because I just got off the phone with Mrs. Baker, Mark Baker's wife, and she said that Mark would love to come on the air with us and talk about what happened in the past and how he's running for sheriff. And I recounted a short story with her. Guineith, you might get a chuckle out of this. Mark Baker was being attacked by a bunch of government minions, and he was surrounded. His family was surrounded by these thugs, and so a bunch of us went up to Indiana to meet with him, and I shared with him some of our tactics. I shared our tactics, and our tactics are the same tactics that they use. Their tactics are to get overwhelming force. To use overwhelming force against us. So and you see it all the time, when you see a police car here in the United States, it's not one, it's multiple police cars, and then there's one guy with his hands up, or he's thrown over the hood of a police car, or his own car, and he's handcuffed, and there's a bunch of them, and one of us, and then a bunch of, maybe a few bystanders watching what happened. Anyway, so what I explained to him is that we need to give them individual credit for all the things that they're doing. And what would that individual credit be? Well, that would be make sure their pictures on the internet, make sure their name and address is on the internet, and those kind of things. So Mark Baker used those tactics, and he singled them out and put them on YouTube, and ultimately he won. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, that's good. I'll tell you what is working, or seems to be working locally around here, is another tactic that they use is to attempt to break us financially by issuing us with, here they're called infringement notices, okay? You would probably call them fines in America. The figures in them seem to be rather arbitrary and often excessive. And around here, I don't know if I've mentioned it on USA Prepares, but the local sergeant here has been issuing and getting his officers to issue huge infringement notices and then excusing them if especially local single mothers and other single women agree to provide him with with an evening's entertainment. Okay? Now, one of the reasons why me and the local police don't really get along is because I've politely declined his offer. And but we can issue infringement notices against them as well. And they are called affidavits for damages or affidavits of harm. Okay? It's a bit of a process. The whole process can take 6 months or more, okay? But basically, at the end of it, if they don't pay on the infringement notice, just like if you don't pay on a fine, your credit's destroyed. If they don't pay on a fine, their credit is also destroyed, okay? And this is a way that, they have to have genuinely harmed you. And you have to you have to make up an affidavit describing how they have harmed you. And to put a clause in the end of that affidavit claiming damages. Okay? The process has been published on the internet. I intend to provide, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours, on my Facebook group, which is Aussie Common Law, all one word. Okay, so that's facebook.com/Aussie Common Law. Come and like my page. I'll be posting this method probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. I provided the method to Mike Parsons in an email just recently, and this has worked against the dog ranger. This has worked against the child snatchers, otherwise known as the Families Department. I don't see any point in calling them the Families Department. They're child kidnappers. And I threatened to issue them with liens, okay, which is the end result of the process with the affidavit of harm, is you end up filing a lien against them.
Is this a lien against their property?
Yeah, a lien against their property.
Then they can't sell it.
They can't sell it. Okay, and not only that, you can sell that lien. It's a security, and you can gain some financial compensation for the harm that you've suffered, and it's outside of the court system. It's exactly the same process that they use, and there's no way that they can ever do away with it, because it's their cash cow too.
I've read story after story about people who have placed liens against politicians' property, and it drives them crazy. Literally, So it's a brilliant strategy. So we need to learn more about it. So I'm at facebook.com/Aussie, AUSSIE Common Law. Is that you?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And it's called the Common Law Education and Resource Center. But it was something that I set up to help to educate people about the common law. And it's specifically focused on British common law, but a lot of the common law is the same everywhere. There are things that are different, but, most of it has not changed. Like, for instance, in America, you no longer have the statute of monopolies, okay? But instead, you have antitrust law, which is the same thing, okay? So when the U.S. seceded from Britain, they said, okay, British laws no longer apply, and that included the statute of monopolies. But then they went and they said, okay, we're going to put in antitrust legislation and have that as a facet of American common law. And I think that's also in your Constitution, isn't it? That it's not allowable for one company to form a monopoly over a particular area of trade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely.
Yeah, yes.
I don't know if it's in the Constitution, but I know that it's called antitrust in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
We have. Yes. By the way, I was looking at the city of Bolivar as you were mentioning this. I got slightly distracted. You were talking about these outrageous fines. So, in Bolivar, Missouri, failure to register your dog, there's a fine of $12.50, court cost of $26.50, $39 total. Now, if you don't restrain your dog, total cost is $84. If you skateboard, it's $111.
Yep.
Some of these fines are pretty high.
That's ridiculous little things.
Right. Right.
Really?
And if you fail... Right.
Yeah.
And if you seatbelt, if you fail to use your seatbelt in your car, it's $10. Obstruction of moving traffic, I have no idea what that is. Maybe you get a flat tire. I don't know what that means. $111. No proof of insurance, $111. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that you have insurance, but you don't have that insurance document with you? What does failure, no proof of insurance mean? So, defective equipment, that could be, your tail light doesn't work, that's $84. There's a whole list of these things.
Yeah.
It's a page of these fines, and I think they're outrageous.
Yeah, they are.
In terms of...
Mm-hmm. But the thing is, most of them are stupid little things, okay? Whereas the harm that they're causing us is real... We've got people dying out there. Okay, because they won't give up their goat herds and stuff like that. It really is awful. It's genuine harm that we are suffering, and people need to stop feeling like it's their fault. They need to stop feeling like there's something wrong with them, and they need to stand up for themselves. Because these people are bullies, they're thugs, they're extortionists, and the United States government is a corporation. It is not a government, okay? And it's operating contrary to antitrust. When it requires registrations, when it requires licenses to do ordinary activities, like, for instance, to get into your car and go down to the supermarket, there's people dying because the police are pulling them over and, pepper spraying them, which sends them into an asthmatic episode, or just shooting them, bashing them, because they didn't have their motor vehicle registration and they needed to go to the grocery store. And they end up dead. This is just not on. And even if my car's still off the road from when it was T-boned, okay, partly I'm delaying fixing it because I'm thinking to myself, if I fix this car, I'm going to be tempted to use it. And I'm not sure that I'm at the point now where I would feel safe taking my own motor vehicle on the road. What are they going to do next? I've had these guys trying to pull my door open at peak hour on a highway. Fortunately, my door was locked. But what would they do? Throw me into the oncoming traffic? You know, it's
when you say these guys, you're talking about the
police, State Highway Patrol in Victoria. Victoria Police State Highway Patrol. Unfortunately, I don't know the officer's name. We didn't get that far, you know, but this happened. It's just disgusting. And I was just out and about. I'd just done a trip to the rubbish tip with my youth, and I had gotten some stuff from the tip shop from the recycling centre, and I was taking it home. And it could have ended very, very badly for me indeed, except that I had my car door locked.
Let's talk about that when we come back.
That little difference may have saved my life.
Class, I just posted the Common Law Education and Resource Center, page 1, usaprepares.com, page 1, and there's a link right to Guineith Isaacs' Facebook page. So if you'd like to peruse that, there's a link ready to go. So, Guineith, you're finding that the police are a little less friendly. They're taking advantage. And I was talking to one of our sons about what I thought might happen as society devolves. And our son said, "Oh, Dad, no, what's going to happen is the police are going to be in business for themselves.
Yeah.
It's not like they're going to go home. All of them are going to go home. Some of them are going to set up shop, and they're going to be highway robbers.
Yep.
They're going
That's
to
how it
be
is
home
here now.
Wow.
That's how it is here now. They get a fee for every, infringement notice that they issue. They get a cut. Okay?
So
and the Victoria Police has an Australian business number, which means that they are a company. And Vic Roads, which is the Roads Board, is a company, and the Victorian Department of Justice is a company. They have ABNs, which is the business number, and they operate on a basis of trade. That's how
some
it is
people
here now.
Some people may think you're exaggerating.
No.
I'm here to tell you, class. No, I know you're not. Because when the city of Lebanon, Missouri Corporation declared war on USA Prepares, I called the mayor of the city of Lebanon Corporation, and I said, I would like to meet with you, Mayor, as CEO to CEO. I am the CEO of USA Prepares. You are the CEO of the City of Lebanon Corporation, and I have a problem, and I'd like to work this out. And he said, okay. He didn't say, I don't know what you're talking about, Finelli. We're not a corporation. We're just, a local government here. He did not flinch when I said he's the CEO of his corporation.
Yep.
So you're right.
Yep, that's right. And, it's like this. Under antitrust antitrust area of common law, okay, a corporation cannot behave as government. That means that it cannot raise taxes. It cannot demand that you do what it says by force of arms, by financial force or otherwise. And you are not compelled to contract with them. And why should we contract with them? They're a bunch of thugs who want to see us destroyed. Why should we want to contract with them?
And that's what Mike Parsons has been telling us for quite a while. Yeah. He's saying that when these guys come in black uniforms, blue uniforms, not so much blue anymore, but black uniforms, that they're combat ready. They are ready for war as they approach your car or your truck or your vehicle, and they he tells him he does not want to do commerce with them. He does not want to engage in commerce with them. He does not want to contract with them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And you know something? I have my son. When he was younger, I've been doing this for a few years now. But when my son was younger, I said, "Son, go and clean your room." And he turned around and he said, "Mum, I do not consent to contract with you." And I said, "You don't understand. You're a minor. I'm your mum. Your room's messy. You need to go and clean it." Anyway, I think that's about the end of my time, isn't it?
Yeah. Hey, Guineith, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your adventures in Australia.
That's all right.
And the website is available. Page 1, USA Prepares, Common Law, Education, and Resource Center. Guineith Isaacs. She's a USA Prepares instructor. Guineith, thank you so much.
Okay, God bless you. See you later.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Mike Parsons is with us. Welcome, Mike.
Greetings, Vincent.
Mike, did you get all your farm chores done before getting behind the microphone this morning?
Yeah, we were up late last night unloading the last of the hay that we've accumulated and getting it piled up and covered and tarped and ready for the winter.
Yeah. That's what farming is like. You're working until the job is done. Sometimes it's going to rain and it hurries the pace. Sometimes it's freezing cold and it's hard to go fast. And that's what we're getting ready for, Mike. We're getting ready for the freezing cold. And I remember being on the tractor feeding those cows, and the snow and the sleet was landing on my face, and it was like stinging with every pelt. And I was thinking, I'm so glad these government bureau rats are working so hard for me. I'm sure that they park next to the building, and the toughest part of their day is walking from their vehicle to that government office, and then it's easy from then on. And but they complain about how hard they work, right?
Yeah, that's a fact. That's in this time of economic struggle, it's amazing that the United States government corporation and the local state of X corporations have yet to have to lay off a single employee.
Isn't that amazing? And when you talk to government employees, my experience is I had this young gal as a secretary back in the 1970s. And those were the days of the IBM Selectric typewriters in a government office. And I would say to her, can you take a memo? Vincent, I just got here. Okay. And then I'd go back a little while later. She said, Vincent, it's almost time to go on break. Okay. And then, Vincent, I just got back from break. Vincent, it's almost lunchtime. Vincent, I'm getting ready to go to lunch. Just got back from lunch. And it was like that. And finally, I just decided, well, it's easy. I'll just replace her with a computer. And I did. I replaced her with a computer. And what we did was, back then, you could get a one-station word processing system. So I brought a one-station word processing system in, and we had one person who was dedicated to word processing, spell checking and all that. And it worked great. So, but, they still kept her. And, it wasn't my job to fire her. But if I would, I probably would have, made 50% more space in that government office. I would have found 50% more space by firing people. I remember I was producing these computer printouts, these green bar reports, 14, almost 15 inches wide, and they were printed by the mainframe computer printer. And one of the guys would show up at my office like, Vincent, I need my report. I need it like right now. It's like once a week print this massive, massive report on the database of those who were being, quote unquote, helped by this particular government agency. And I got so annoyed with this guy, and I thought, I don't think this guy even reads this report. So those were the days that you would bind the reports in these slippery plastic flexible binders. And so I bound his report inside out. So you could read the first page, but then after the first page, you couldn't read it because you couldn't see the pages because they were on the inside bound. And so I went into his office a little later after his report was delivered. I said, everything okay? I mean, on time and everything? Good? Yep, it's good. He's good. He's all happy because he got his report. So I said, well, look, you can't read this. Huh. Someone must have bound this inside out. Huh. How do you use this? And he knew he was had. The other thing I did back in those days was people would call me and say, what's wrong with the computer? What's wrong with the computer? And I just got there, and my job was to fix this morass of this computer system. This mainframe is always going down. And so I built a list, and the list had 31 items on it. And those were 31 possible reasons why the computer could go down. Possible reasons. And people would call me, so what I would do is I'd say, well, wait, today? Hold on a second. Today is the 7th. And I'd read to the 7th reason that a computer could go down. And I'd say, here's what the reason is. Here's what the problem is. They wanted to know why. They couldn't fix it. They just wanted to know why it was down, as if they could do something about it. So I had 31 reasons. And for whatever the day of the month was, I would just say, okay, it's the 5th, it's the 7th, and I would read off that reason. And they were happy. Those are government employees for you. Just wanted to share that with you, Mike. That was in the late 1970s I did that. Very, very late 1970s. Mike, where do you want to go today?
You know where I want to go. Shall we?
Yeah. Now, I tried to do the audio, Mike. I tried to do the audio. I could not make it intelligible.
No, that's okay. We don't need the audio, but that's what the students and listeners will find out about next. I want to start off by saying there's a saying that I heard earlier this week on another show. It's very apropos to what I'm about to present, and that is, when liars lead, only cowards, accomplices, and the feeble-minded will follow.
Would you say that one more? Would you say that one more time? When liars lead,
only cowards, accomplices, and the feeble-minded will follow. Look around you. Look at the leaders. Look at those people posing as leaders. What are they? And who are those people surrounding themselves with those people, if not cowards, accomplices, and feeble-minded? And fellow liars, of course.
There's a billboard on the way to Springfield. I saw it yesterday, traveling from the farm. It had an image of Hillary Clinton. This is a full billboard. Huge, huge percentage of this billboard was Hillary's face. The rest of it were 3 words. Liar, liar, liar. You're absolutely right.
Well, the problem is that people have been taught to believe as opposed to think. And when you believe, anything is possible. When you think, you see things as they are. And how else could a tyrannical private for-profit corporation posing as government be allowed to exist when the people, otherwise, they would attack them for the crimes that they're committing and eliminate them. But because of their belief system, they're not. And because they're taught to believe a lie, well, especially if it's God's will, I'm going to support God's will, and so they continue to follow along with the narrative and believe the lie. Now, why would otherwise educated and informed people allow their children to be given vaccinations when they know the cause of autism is directly linked to the vaccinations? Cancer is directly linked to the vaccinations, and death, because they've been taught to believe the lies of the man in the white lab coat. Today, people are being taught to believe they must comply to any order issued by a corporate goon in black with blue lights. It's a belief system. When a people have a belief that something is, they are easily dominated because they will not resist any oppression that goes against that belief. They won't do it. Romans 13, you got these corporate preachers pushing that all day long nonstop because they're bringing the slaves in for slaughter. Got to have slaves for Pharaoh. At the beginning of the USA Corporation, think about this for a moment. At the beginning of the USA Corporation's war on Iraq, we heard that they used contractors in Iraq. Most people like myself thought they were talking about carpenters and plumbers and people that were rebuilding the infrastructure, but that's not what they were. A contractor is a hired killer. Let me say that a different way. They're hired killers. They're the guys now that live next door to you who've shaved their heads and gotten all tattooed up and grown a beard, and they go over and they just start killing people for money. They're killing human beings for money. And that's what comes back and lives next door to you, and that's what's there every day before they're reassigned, looking over your home and your family while you're gone to work. Remember, these people who are dependent upon corporations posing as government, who provide, the government's posing as, well, the corporations posing as government are providing the income, and as such, those people are loyal to their masters. They believe they are doing God's work in the name of justice, glory, and the flag. Talk to one of them. That's what you'll get. They disassociate with the reality. These guys are so screwed up in the heads, they cannot be trusted. And because we can't take the time to overcome their love of money from the private corporation, because they've got a printing press. There's nothing we can do about that. We cannot overcome. All we can do is try to reach these people that are fixing to sign on the dotted line intellectually before they sign. It's like this: breaking a welfare recipient or drug addict or corporate government employee of their addiction to money and drugs is next to impossible. They would sell their children and their very soul for their next fix on drugs and money. To them, being independent, self-sufficient, and self-governing is a crime and a sin. Well, earlier this week, I had an opportunity to experience this firsthand with a former Army lieutenant colonel who's now a private contractor who advertises as a private for-profit security corporation called Northbridge Services Group. That's northbridgeservices.org. And if you click on the Who We Are, you'll see this fine individual, this retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Kovacic. And I'm going to tell you about this retired Army on the payroll pension receiving individual in just a minute when we come back from this break, and you're not going to believe what these people are up to.
Mike Parsons, what's the website one more time?
northbridgeservices.org.
Okay, Mike Parsons, and I'll be right back. Class, Mike Parsons is with us. Quite serious discussion today. He mentioned northbridgeservices.org. northbridgeservices.org. Mike, I'm at the website. These guys are purporting to be quite serious.
Right. This is a group that advertises that they have anything from paramilitary operation experience to security, protecting high-profile people, and other types of services to educate and train. And as many of you know, I've been appointed as an Associate Justice of the Universal Supreme Court of the Chilcotin Indian Nation in what you know as British Columbia, and working with them trying to solidify their sovereignty of their country and resources, aside from writing letters to the United Nations and others. And they were looking at getting a group to help them with providing security and protection for their hierarchy of their government, as well as finding ways and solutions to peacefully remove those people that are on their territory that are illegally logging and posing as government, that are basically running roughshod over the people, stealing their children, and things like that, committing crimes against the people, as it were. And this organization said that they were very discreet, that they would, basically work for these people that they weren't afraid of anything, and that for, a fee to pay to have them flown up there for a week, pay for their hotels, meals, and so much per day, they would come up and evaluate everything and provide an analysis outlining exactly what these people should do in order to achieve those objectives. And this reality struck shortly after they got there. The Supreme Court Justice of the Universal Supreme Court was basically going along with them to show them the area, and they immediately went into quizzing her on her background and various things, and realized before they had ever been any kind of agreement to hire these guys to come up and help in evaluating the situation, they assured us, after providing them all of the documentation, that the Chilcotin Nation is a sovereign nation of people who have, by right, their own right to their own land and their own self-determination. They're a self-governing people with a constitution, and universalsupremecourt.org is where you can read more about that. But at the end of the day, they were on board that the Canadian corporation posers were illegally on the territory, and that those people that they were supporting were illegal in their positions, and that the logging that was being done also was illegal. And they understood and agreed to that before they were ever allowed to do anything and asked to do anything as far as giving an evaluation. Well, shortly after arriving, they determined that their loyalty was to the United States and the Canada corporations. They don't recognize them as corporations. They recognize them as sovereigns. And these government retirees who get a paycheck every month from the government as a retiree, this guy Kovacic, the simple question was posed to him after I was able to speak to them via phone. If the RCMP, which is the Canadian police, rolled up, would you turn over this associate or this Chief Justice, or would you protect her as you agreed to? The man wouldn't answer the question. And you've got a copy of the audio. We're not playing it because it's poor quality and not suitable for the radio. But I've distributed that far and wide so that it's out there. And this guy basically blows up, loses his cool, and says he's going to come to Tennessee and challenge me to a duel and pistols, and then basically flew off the handle. And then later, he told the chief of the Chief Justice that he was going to come to Tennessee, that he was going to shoot me and kill me. And then while she's in his vehicle, this is a Army colonel who's telling this 5'5" tall, 51-year-old woman that's 120 pounds that he was not going to let her out of his vehicle until she paid him the full amount that he was expecting for the week's work, though he had not done anything towards that paycheck. And we'll pick up.
Mike,
on the other side.
Are you describing a bully? Is that the mental image that's what I have? Mike Parsons is with us, and Mike, I'm at the website northbridgeservices.org, the website that you talked about, and I'm looking at this LTC, Robert W. Kovacic. Am I saying that right? Kovacic?
I believe he pronounces it Kovacic. I believe he's from Slovakia.
Okay,
and he's been a government employee his whole life. And now, as a retiree drawing a paycheck, he's advertising through this company that he is a service provider for security, mercenaries, the whole bit. And though we explained to him we were looking for peaceful solutions, but we needed security and protection, and people willing to, stand between those people of the Chilcotin Nation and these corporations posing as government that potentially might create a problem for their security. And, of course, he agreed that's what they did and, got the nation to pay to have him flown up there, put up in a hotel, meals paid, rental car, all this stuff. and then come to find out that when asked a simple question, after it was obvious that he was basically doing different intel gathering as opposed to what he had been hired to do, he was trying to do an analysis of the Chilcotin people. And just ask a simple question. If the RCMP rolled up, would you protect the Chief Justice, or would you turn her over to the RCMP? And he wouldn't answer the question, would not answer the question, and then was basically saying that he's looking to assist us in finding paramilitary, which I told him repeatedly, I've never asked you to do that. I've never asked you to do anything. We're not looking for paramilitary. We're looking for peaceful solutions, but we want to find out what you advise. And so he was basically creating a scenario. He was recording everything as I. So I've got that verification in case that's ever an issue. I can prove what I said and what I didn't say. And, of course, that's their stumbling block. This guy is an operative, is a fraud, and people need to be aware of the fact that government employees that are on the payroll and that are receiving payments, no different than a welfare recipient, no different than a drug addict. They're addicted to that almighty dollar, and that's their master. And those people cannot be trusted, period. That's the end of the day message, because at the end of the day, the person that he was basically tasked with protecting, he was willing to sell out in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Because that's how his programming is. He's trained to be loyal to the corporate entity. The truth doesn't matter. The rightful owners to the land, the sovereignty, the rightful sovereignty, doesn't matter. This guy can't wrap his mind around the fact that a corporation cannot be sovereign. There's a thing called the Clearfield Doctrine. If you search Clearfield Doctrine, it's a Supreme Court ruling where they admitted, I think it's back in the 40s, a corporation is a fiction on paper. It can't be sovereign. It doesn't possess the qualities of a human being. Although the government is slowly trying to make a corporation have the same effect as a human being, it's not. And it can't be sovereign. It's nothing more than a creation on paper. It's a fiction. So this guy is basically telling this 5 foot, 5 inch tall, 120 pound, 51-year-old woman that nobody stiffs Bob Kovacki, quote unquote. And if he doesn't get paid, well, there's going to be trouble. And so he basically threatens her and extorts her to pay him for the 5 days. And even though he'd only been there 3, it doesn't matter. He wants that money regardless. And then what does he do? As soon as she gets out of the car, he proceeds to call the RCMP and turn her in. So the RCMP, you're wondering, why is the police after this Chief Justice? Because she's a Chief Justice. Because she's working for a sovereign nation that is not going along with the scam of the Canadian corporation, because they're working to solidify not only their resources, but also get their kids back. And right now, every child that's in the the foster care system of the RCMP, the Canadian government, generates $300,000 per child per year to the government of Canada. That's how much they're extracting from the taxpayers to put into the bureaucracy. Every year, in these small little reserves where you might have 1,800 natives total, it's not uncommon to find 300 or more children out of that small reserve gone into welfare programs, and they keep them until they're 18. And then they release them back out on society, and the natives don't want them because they're not native. They don't know what they are. They're usually on drugs, and they usually end up in jail where, because they're native, again, the government extracts $155,000 per year per inmate, and that's where they keep them. It's a perpetual cycle of funding a bureaucracy on the backs of the Native Americans in Canada. Look around you. Look in this country. You'll see the same thing. Look at the children, native and non, that are being kidnapped, put in foster care. Yeah, you might see a foster family making $50,000 a year, but what you don't know is the hundreds of thousands that are going back in the local bureaucracy that is underwriting the cost of all these bureaucrats. For each welfare or for each foster child, there's probably 5 bureaucrats being funded. That's a lot of jobs. What is it they say now? 1 in 5 jobs is a bureaucrat, a government employee, where 30 years ago it used to be 1 in 200. That's not sustainable. There's no way that we, the people, can afford to pay taxes to underwrite that many bureaucrats. Well, because they've got a printing press and they just put it in an account owed, that's how they get away with stealing everything that you own. And now that the Federal Reserve is talking about floating the idea about investing in stocks, they've got a printing press. It's illegal. How would it be if you're the guy creating the currency? You could print up as much as you want as long as you didn't buy anything, because obviously you could buy up everything. Well, that's what they're doing. They're buying up everything. They bought up the toxic mortgages, as they called them. Yeah. All these houses that are now owned by the Federal Reserve, private for-profit corporation, and pretty soon your stock portfolio will be owned by the private for-profit Federal Reserve. At the end of the day, the man that prints the money can own it all. What's the fella, Rothschild? The owner and controller of the London Bank and the Federal Reserve and all these other private for-profit banks. This is what's going on. And these private for-profit mercenaries like Bob Kovacic, who's getting a paycheck, and his buddy, who's a retired police officer, as he said when he's flying up there, I can't wait to get there and sample the local whiskey. I hear the Canadian whiskey is great. And I think you made the statement, well, yeah, they actually sell that here in the United States. You don't have to go there to sample that.
Canadian Lord Calvert's been here for at least the 70s that I know of, because I know someone who liked it. Well,
clearly his intent of going up there was to take a little mini vacation and make a little bit of money and do what kind of intel he can on the Chilcotin Nation to be able to report that back to his master. These people can't be trusted. They're liars, they're thieves, and they're cowards. Now, he's threatened my life. He's told her, and I've got a recording of it, where he says that he's coming to Tennessee to shoot me. And so I'm letting that be publicly known so that if anything happens to me, there are people that will be watching Bob Kovacic of Lexington, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mike, I'm looking at Kovacic, Robert W. Kovacic, LTC, retired. It says that he assumed this is on his website, assumed the duties as president of Northbridge Services Group, 26 August 2003. He was commissioned in armor in 1970 as a Vietnam veteran. He has served in numerous leadership and command positions in the light infantry, mechanized infantry, cavalry, and tank units. He has commanded 6 platoons, 3 companies, and 2 battalions. He has been a tactics instructor and doctrine writer in both the U.S. Army Armor and Engineer schools. He is an airborne ranger and a jungle expert, qualified and earned the Combat Infantryman's badge. He's served in Europe, Vietnam, Southwest Asia. Bob understands the terrain and operations involved for temperate, jungle, and desert environments. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a Master of Science degree in information systems. This guy sounds like a real wonderful person. But if you read into it, infantry, those are the guys that kill people.
Yeah.
For a living.
Hired killers living next door to you.
Well, you mentioned that several times, Mike Parsons, and what you're saying is absolutely, positively correct. There are people who will go to, they are hired mercenaries, they work for these corporations, and they will go kill people for a living. And then they'll come back after they've earned an enormous per hour compensation, enormous compared to what you could get here. So you could earn $150,000 or more killing people. People you don't know. And for reasons you don't know. And you don't question. You just go out there and start killing people. You get paid and you come home. How awful is that?
Well, the interesting thing is that when I asked the simple question, would you protect her against a beat cop? I wasn't there. Obviously, I'm 2,000 miles away from where he was, but it was clear that the guy was, how should we say, perspiring his britches?
Yeah.
So the thought of confronting a beat cop in Canada was more threatening than anything else, apparently, this guy had come across in a long time. Thou shalt not go against the master's minions.
Mike, this is quite frightening because these people are out there. We'll be right back. Mike Parsons is with us. Mike, let me make sure I've got this correct. Are you saying that the president and chief executive officer of Northbridge Services threatened to kill you?
Bob Kovacic threatened my life verbally over the phone, and then to the chief justice of the Universal Supreme Court of the Chilcotin Nation, told her that he was going to go to Tennessee and shoot me. Now, the audio is scratchy, but I've got it, and it's been dispersed. You got a copy of it. Several people have a copy of that. And though it's not meant to be played on the radio because it's kind of hard to listen to, and it's not that great a quality, it's clear what he said and what his intent was. And given his history, his background, this is a nut job that I'm taking very seriously. Now, I don't
understand
live anywhere near Lexington, Kentucky. I don't know that he knows where I live. I would advise him to stay away from me and my family and any of my friends, and to utilize his time better spent trying to do things positively as opposed to being a professional coward and liar and feeble-minded individual following those in a false paradigm through a construct of a belief in a corporation posing as government that he's done his whole life.
Mike,
However, I don't believe the guy can do it.
Mike, I understand that you know a number of broadcasters, not just me, but a lot of us, and that this audio is in the hands of many broadcasters, and that if anything were to happen to you or your family, that the button will be pushed and the audio will be played. That's my understanding. So,
well, I just wanted to share this because of the fact that, number one, this Chief Justice, this guy that this man was so worried about, her claim to fame is that she took the Canadian government to court to try to get benefits for her son who was injured by their hospital. The government runs and controls the hospital. So when he was injured at birth and has debilitating injuries that he'll be with the rest of his life, she went to court and fought to get the funding to take care of him for the rest of his life, and she was successful. Because she stood up to the government, she's viewed as a threat. And then she has fought to get the rights of the natives secured and their sovereignty secured. And people like her that are outspoken and willing to stand up against these corrupt corporations is what they view as a threat. And then someone like myself who's willing to speak out and expose their corruption, they view me as a threat. The threat to these people, it's called light. It's exposing their corruption and bringing that to the masses so that people can go by and see them say, yeah, that's that guy, as you talked about. Yeah, that's that Bob Kovacic. That's the guy right there. He said he was going to Tennessee to shoot Mike Parsons. For what? For asking the simple question, would he defend a 5'5" tall, 120-pound woman against the policeman in British Columbia if they tried to arrest her? Apparently, no. Apparently, this highly decorated U.S. Army lieutenant colonel was afraid of a beat cop in B.C. because he might go against his master, the corporate government, and they might not want to keep paying him. Who'd have thought someone with so much experience would have so little courage?
When you talked about the resources of the Native Americans, how would you describe those resources? Are we talking about timber?
We're talking about vast expanses of timber to which the British Columbia is profiting about $12 billion with a B dollars per year directly in the revenue stream. $12 billion a year. And they're just scratching the surface. That's what we're working on doing, is solidifying the timber rights and control back to the natives who it belongs to in the first place. That's what they're upset about. That's why they don't want Mike Parsons involved, because I'm helping them get their kids back and take control of their resources for their own benefit, so they no longer receive a welfare check. They live nicely and comfortably on their own resources.
Are you saying, Mike, that the timber was stolen?
It's being stolen right from underneath their eyes.
There you go. Mike, thanks so much for sharing this. Of course, there'll be more. There'll be plenty more where this came from. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.